Hello, everybody. It's lovely to be joined this afternoon by three organ scholars. So Tim, who was my first, Tim Ravals, who's now assistant organist in Chichester, and his cat Suki, Tim's the one on the left of the screen. And Tim was my organ scholar here at St John's my first 3 years here, and then Glenn Dempsey, who's now assistant organist at Ely, and then James, who is still playing the organ here at St John's. So it's great to have you all with us. And we chose to have Tim, Glenn and James with me in this conversation because we're just about to release our new disc, Advent Live 2, and that includes various tracks from pre-Advent Carol services at which we were playing the organ. And perhaps it's nice for me to just reminisce a little bit about my years when I was organ scholar, because back from 1987, because the Advent Carol service, I think this year is the 40th time that the 40th consecutive year that the BBC will be broadcasting it here. And back when I was organ scholar, I suppose it was a tradition that had only been going for 6 years or so. I still have. I found these books that we have these ring bound folders with all the with all the music in. And George used to like marking everything in red biro, so I've still got my red biro here. But that seems a very long time ago. We used to sing a lot of music from the Oxford Book of Carols with just little twiddles, sort of improvised or something in between the verses. George liked. Of course, mine were not really improvised. It was all prepared because I was too nervous. But a large amount of the rehearsal time in those days used to be spent on Welsh pronunciation, I remember. Something we've neglected recently, but perhaps ought to bring back soon. But one of the things I remember, I don't know whether the rest of you agree, is just the particular sound of the chapel when it's absolutely full of people. You know, without actually looking into the building, you could just hear that there were loads of people there because of the way all the resonance disappeared. I used to find that exciting. Anyway, Tim, tell me about some of your memories.
Well, I played for 2 Advent Carol services at St John's, and 2008 would have been my first, and that's the Advent Carol service that my one track that I play on this CD comes from, John McCabe's setting of The Last and Greatest Herald. And I think that encounter was the first time I'd ever properly met what I might describe as a real-life composer. Someone I'd actually heard of, someone whose set of Haydn piano sonatas I knew as well, him as a pianist. And having spent all this time getting to know the organ part of his piece, which I found quite a handful at the time, and I think probably still would, I entered the Advent weekend with some trepidation, really, because I had no idea what sort of character I was going to meet in this composer who was potentially going to rip me to pieces, I thought. And I was so unbelievably reassured by him. He was a lovely man. He was very kind. And the thing I discovered on that occasion for the first time is that I haven't subsequently met a composer who wasn't just delighted that their music was being performed. And he was the first one who showed me that. I don't think the track that appears on this CD is the very first performance. I think it's probably the second, though Andrew might be able to correct that. I do remember not having a very good time in the first performance, and John McCabe afterwards saying something very nice about how something always went wrong in premieres, and don't worry, it's fine. I think we had a better time. At least I had a better time on the second day. Otherwise, I have lots of memories of Advent. The wind blowing through the chapel in that late November or early December way that it does in Cambridge, getting cold fingers in the organ loft. Playing Stanford in A Magnificat live on Radio 3, which I think was even more terrifying than the McCabe. And there are so many things, but I think I'm going to pass on to Glenn and ask him what it was like a few years later.
Well, I too have very many happy memories of 4 Advent carol services. Some that stick in my head particularly come from 2016 when I was junior organ scholar, so not actually playing the organ. So I played some music before the service and then went down and sat in the congregation. And I know exactly what Andrew means when he talks about feeling the kind of enormous energy of the packed chapel. And as soon as the red light goes on, there's an amazing kind of loud hushness, if I can use an oxymoron like that, with the chapel just kind of hanging on to every note that the choir sings. And I don't know what you will think, but I think that atmosphere can be really hard to generate on a CD recording in kind of studio conditions. And I think having listened to some tracks from this CD, that really comes over, including on the 2008 track, which I think sounds absolutely amazing. There was a kind of different level of electricity the following year in 2017 when I was rather nervous about playing for my first one. In that 2 or 3 minutes before the service was due to start, I had the bright idea of quadruple checking my first Tim piston, just for something to do to calm the nerves. And I pushed this button, and suddenly there was a slight kind of minor organ malfunction in that there was what the late Master Sir Christopher Dobson described as, sounding like the foghorns coming in at Felixstowe docks it was a pedal ophiclide that was ciphering. I just remember seeing in the camera Andrew coming up to the organ loft, and Jav and I just had a quick conversation. I said, well, you might just need to hold that one in. And I said to Andrew, I think something like, don't worry, we'll sort the organ out. And then I think Andrew went and reassured I can't quite remember what you said to the choir, Andrew.
I can't remember. I think I went back there and told lots of jokes or something. Because, the problem is when there's some potential crisis like that, just, during a broadcast or something, it's going to make, the danger is it makes everybody incredibly on edge. And you can't sing well if you're on edge. So I think I had to somehow break the tension back there somehow with some mad antic. But I can't remember what it was.
I have a vague memory that one of our fabulous bassers, Ollie Morris, had come back from his year abroad to hear the service. And I think he might have said, don't worry, gents, Mr. Morris is just warming up for the hymns or something along those lines. Actually,
sorry to Mr. Morris.
But I very much enjoyed playing for that service, and indeed the following year. It's such a thrill doing it live on the radio. And for the 2018 service, I had exactly the same experience that Tim described with Cecilia McDowell, whose commission appears on this CD based on Ut Quaent Laxis. And if you listen to the organ registrations and the way they relate to the choir, you can kind of hear the ripples of water, thinking about John the Baptist baptizing Jesus. And I just remember Cecilia coming into the organ loft a few days before we did this piece for the first time, and her kind of warm persona just made me feel completely at ease. And I think she was exactly the same with the choir. And it's just such a nourishing thing to be collaborating with these great composers who are just such lovely people. I think those are some of my happiest memories from St. John's, but I think I've been talking for too long, so I'll pass on to Jav.
I've only played for one Advent Carol service so far, and I'm just in 2 weeks going to be doing my second. And my earliest memories of the carol services come from when Glenn was playing. And as the junior organ scholar, you don't play on the broadcast, but you play a bit of the recital before the service, and that's not on the radio. And I found it absolutely extraordinary. People have been saying about the sort of atmosphere in chapel and the way the acoustic changes, and I found it just extraordinary that while playing your half an hour of the recital, the acoustic changes, sort of, you can hear it changing during during a piece. It's just the most bizarre feeling ever. And, you know, at the start of the recital, you look down and the chapel's empty, and at the end, it's just kind of completely full of people right to the end. It's completely bizarre. Another early memory is from when I think it was in my first year when Glenn was playing as well, and we had a bit of a minor incident in the organ loft with a soft drink during the rehearsal, which managed to slightly dampen some of the copies of the music. So I had to spend the next 20 minutes barbecuing each of the copies on the radiator to try and sort them out. I think yesterday I noticed that we still got a few stains on the copy of the Cherry Tree Carol. So,
I'm sorry.
It's a bit of evidence there. It's good. Musically, though, I mean, I think some of the things that I've enjoyed the most in the carol services have been the sort of theatrical moments with the big Advent carols. Obviously, there's one thing that we sort of almost always do now with doing a dramatic segue from the final choir piece into Lo He Comes with Clouds Descending, and that's a really fantastic moment, and I think it's the only time in my life I'll ever play a hymn introduction louder than I play the first verse. That sort of specific thing I think was really, really well used as well by Judith Bingham in her piece, the introduction to Hark the Glad Sound, which is on the disc. And the piece doesn't have organ in it, it's just for choir and soprano saxophone, and then right at the end the organ bursts in from the last choir chord, and then the congregation sings the hymn, and moments like that were just fantastic to be involved in. But I was quite nervous last year, so hopefully it'll feel a little bit more relaxing this year. We'll see.
Well, thank you all so much for your reminiscences. It's absolutely fantastic to see you all. This year's service, of course, is going to be a bit different because the acoustic won't change very much between the rehearsal and the service, because sadly no members of the congregation at all are going to be allowed in here. But we're extremely fortunate that we're allowed to keep singing at all in these circumstances, and we hope very much that people will enjoy what they hear on the radio. But what a treat to have all you three here, and I must just say that as you know, being director of music in St John's, one of the very, very, very best things, probably the best thing about it, is having this amazing succession of organ scholars and colleagues and friends who are just superhuman in their abilities, and how lovely to see three of you on the screen together. And I'm just indescribably proud of all the things you've gone on to do. So thank you very much for joining us today, and we hope that the people watching this video will enjoy the release of our Advent Live Volume 2 CD when it comes out on Friday the 27th of November.